Oh, hi there. Haven't made a hockey video for a little bit, so I figured I'd weigh in on Washington Capitals versus the Vegas Golden Knights. Both games were relatively close, from what I gathered. Didn't watch either of them. I have my reasons. Second game, Washington came out on top, 3-2. They were outshot, I believe, by at least 10 shots, so that's pretty important. It means Holtby, he stood his ground, which is good. Because a lot of people, including the hockey guy, were going on about how good Marc-Andre Fleury is, and maybe it's just the chemistry of being on a new team, because the thing is, his performance was slumping as a Pittsburgh Penguin, and this seems to have revitalized his career, in the opinion of some people. He has done well. I don't want to see him win another Stanley Cup. That's just my personal bias against Pittsburgh. And, Marc-Andre Fleury was on Pittsburgh, and now he's on Vegas Golden Knights. I'm kind of hoping for a more physical series. Because the thing is, for a guy like Alex Ovechkin, I really want to see him win a Stanley Cup. I know I've said before, he may never win one, and I've made plenty of Stanley Cup final videos where I'm talking about where the one team, they get their great opportunity, and then they don't win, and then they kind of fall out of being a Stanley Cup final contender. Last year it happened with Nashville. Year before it happened with the Sharks, of course. And there are a lot of teams that as soon as they make it to the final, if something goes wrong and they don't win, they're not back at the final next year. Take Vancouver for instance. After 1994, yeah, it was a little while before the Canucks were back in the Stanley Cup final, I gotta say. And Alex Ovechkin, unfortunately for him, if he loses now, it's just, his career unfortunately is all downhill from here. However, if he wins, there's a chance he could win the Cup again next year. Probably not, but there is a chance. I had made a video before talking about how I thought he should have been traded to Philly while he was still worth something. I guess I look like the fool now, because now they're tied in a series in the Stanley Cup final, whereas Philadelphia? Philadelphia is playing golf someplace. And the Washington Capitals have been able to score goals. Contrary to the Barry Trotz, modality of how he structures his game, he's allowing his team to score goals. Ovechkin, more than a point a playoff game, and same with Kuznetsov. They're doing quite well. In fact, there's only one player on the roster who has played a significant amount of playoff games and doesn't have a goal. What's his name? It was like such a dumb name. It was like Dejoux or something. I think he must be a defenseman or something, or a fourth liner. Probably a defenseman with a name like that, I would think. So yeah, just so everyone knows, I haven't sat down and watched a whole hockey game in quite a while. So I watch the highlights on the computer, I look at the stats, try to delve into different subjects when it comes to hockey. So it's not going to be a play-by-play discussion about the NHL when I make videos. If you want a play-by-play, go watch the hockey guy. The hockey guy is great at that. He can tell you just about everything that goes on in the game and his interpretation of it. For me, I got my reasons. Anyway, Vegas, they've done extremely well. As I said before, when they were playing Winnipeg, even if they had lost that series, their opening season would still have been a tremendous success. And that is the same thing for losing in the Stanley Cup final in their their beginning year. And I do have a bias. I want the Vegas Golden Knights to lose. Because I don't like that their team just has so much corrupt money involved in it. I guess all NHL franchises do, but in particular Vegas might explain why they're doing so well out of the gate. Okay, well, we'll talk about the players. William Karlsson, he's not really been there as far as scoring goals. I believe he has 7 to his name. I know they played less playoff games than Washington, but even still, he's not a point per game guy at this point in time. And 7 isn't an incredibly high number of goals. And the point leader, I know his name because I've read it so many times. It's like Measure. He was on Florida. He's got more goals. He's got 8. He's the leading scorer on the Vegas Golden Knights. And he's not a big guy. He's only like 5'9". So the problem with being a small guy is, sure, you can be zippy on the ice, but you can also be blocked quite easily and just pushed to the corner and you can't get in anywhere. William Karlsson, a little bit bigger, 6'1", but he hasn't been there. He hasn't been scoring goals. He hasn't been the player that he was in the regular season. I have made comparisons before where I figured, for example, like when Boston played Chicago, I'll use that as an example. Boston was dominating as far as goals, points, and all that sort of stuff. Like, they were scoring a lot of goals, and Chicago had considerably less goals, but in the end they still defeated the Boston Bruins a few years back. And some people say defense is what wins Stanley Cups. I would say yes and no. I would prefer it be more offense, because sometimes a good offense is the best defense. But like, you take when the New Jersey Devils played the Anaheim Ducks, the mighty Anaheim Ducks, all those years ago. The mighty Anaheim Ducks, Paul Kariya, they were all big point scorers, but ultimately it was the shutdown, Martin Brodeur, Scott Stevens, and those guys that propelled the New Jersey Devils to win the Stanley Cup. I mean, the hit on Paul Kariya by Scott Stevens is, anybody who has any semblance of knowing what hockey is has seen that hit. And that was choreographed, by the way. Paul Kariya got right back up. It was all for show. So people who think, body checking should be taken out of the game, there shouldn't be any fighting, no more bench brawls and things like that. Simmer the fuck down. It's entertainment. And if it's choreographed, and there are things in the NHL that are choreographed, I don't care if you want to believe it or not, but I used to play hockey, and trust me, it's not because the skill wasn't there, it's because games in real life don't look like the ones on the television. The ones on the television look different for a reason, because it's for entertainment. They're choreographed. I'm not going to say that every little bit, but it would not surprise me at all if the upper echelon of the NHL already knows who's going to win this Stanley Cup. That is almost a given. And as they go down the ladder, eventually getting to the players, I mean, I'm not going to say Ovechkin knows, because he doesn't. The players for both teams are the ones who are the most oblivious out of anyone, because, of course, they all go there with the mentality that they're going to win. I mean, quite often there have been times in playoff series where a team has known that they have a lot of injuries, and somehow they've made it to the final despite all that. just can't bring the game with them. I think that was part of what was Vancouver's issue back in 2011, was that they had a lot of injuries that they didn't disclose. And, you know, they obviously have to suit up their number one line, or their lines. I think there should be more flexibility as far as, you know, drawing up people from the minors to fill in for people who are genuinely injured. I mean, this year, Ryan Kessler was known for, he's going to have hip surgery or something like that. And the hockey guy was talking about it. And the thing is, he shouldn't really have been playing. If he, like, I guess according to the hockey guy, he was playing quite well and all that, but his points weren't there, and it was obvious he was injured. But I think there should be more flexibility in being able to bring up minor league players. Now, there's two things that people won't like about that. One, that's putting a fresh person on the ice, essentially, to help out a team. So I could see, you know, the other team go, wow, that's an advantage right over there. But there should be a quota for both teams, and, you know, depending on the circumstances. Like if a player, one of your main players has a broken hip, that's you know, a significant injury. I would think calling up someone from the minors, quite often a lot of players have a broken foot. That's like, you can't move at all really when you got a broken foot, even if it is all bandaged up, and even if they, you know, whatever they do, it severely slows you down. And there have been previous years where Martin Brodeur, he had a messed up hand in the finals against the LA Kings, but you know, big name, can't take big names out of the roster unless it is physically impossible for them to play. And of course they want to play. They want their name on the Stanley Cup. Like, had Martin Brodeur and the New Jersey Devils had defeated the LA Kings, you know, a couple years back, Martin Brodeur would really want his name on that Stanley Cup. He's already got it there, but he'd want it again. So those are the two main factors on why they can't, you know, bring up players to replace injured ones, especially the stars. Because people get in their head that, okay, you get a Sidney Crosby, and he's about 6 foot tall, you know, I think he's 31 this year, I believe, that because the propaganda and the rhetoric all go, he's the best NHL player. Oh. And they were saying this like well before he won a Stanley Cup. And nobody else since Sidney Crosby has ever gotten that much attention other than Connor McDavid. And like, even today, Connor McDavid is still completely in the shadow of Sidney Crosby. He even admits it himself. And it's not because of his, Sidney Crosby Stanley Cup wins. It's because of just the hype of Sidney Crosby. Now, I don't mean to go on and talk about him every time I go to make a hockey video, but it was matching up with some points I was making. So anyway, I am really hopeful that Washington can defeat Vegas. I think this is definitely going to go to 6 or 7 games for sure. And it was important that Washington, you know, won on the road, and, you know, the Vegas home crowd, you know, they got turned down. Second game? No, you're going to lose that second game. And they needed that, because there's nothing worse than a spoiled fan base. And there are some teams that do have spoiled fan bases, unfortunately. And Vegas is starting to look like one of those ones. I mean, most people in Vegas, I really don't think cared about hockey before the Vegas Golden Knights came around. And they came around because, obviously, the western side of Canada and the United States needed another team here, and they needed one with a significant population and with the money. And so Vegas was the obvious choice. And, you know, now they're going to be doing Seattle probably, or are. I'm a bit confused on that. I think they are going to do Seattle. They're going to have a stupid name, probably an ugly jersey. And who knows, maybe they'll be a rival of the Vancouver Canucks. If they can get it together anyway. I have no doubts about Brock Besser, but they need secondary scoring, and I don't see it on this Vancouver Canucks roster. Anyway, I'm hopeful the Washington Capitals are going to win, and I think they will. Ovechkin's got to give it everything he's got. He's like, it's on him. He's the big man. Yeah, he's the guy who hasn't brought back the cheddar yet, and this is his ultimate opportunity to do so. In my opinion, failure for him is not an option. I mean, as an old Call of Duty expression, work harder, defeat will not be tolerated. And, I think that should apply to Alex Ovechkin and the entirety of the Washington Capitals. I'm sorry to put that on them, but I really do not want Vegas winning. It's just so annoying. I mean, it's annoying enough that a team, no matter what, that hasn't won the Stanley Cup already is going to win the Stanley Cup. Because as I've explained before, that just shortens the pool of teams that haven't won it, which just makes Vancouver Canucks look worse. I mean, I'd hate for one day in the future the only team to have not won the Stanley Cup would be the Vancouver Canucks. That would be kind of embarrassing. Anyway, Game 3 coming up. Not going to watch it. Probably going to watch the hockey guys' interpretation of it. I mean, one of the playoff games I deliberately didn't watch, but I watched the hockey guys live stream, and I watched most of it, and I was asking questions when the game was on. I mean, he didn't answer any of them, or he might have answered one of them, I can't remember, but that's okay. Because I'm just, I'm in a state where I'm looking at the game from a different point of view. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.